Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is Matthew Scott Miller. I guess we can count this as my first official video of this channel. If you guys are seeing the B-roll in the background, well, that's because I went out to this amazing place to go record, but unfortunately it was just way too windy today. I went up to the Angeles National Forest, found this really cool old abandoned campground with a stream running next to it. Figured it was a good place to go record, but Mother Nature had different plans. The wind is just, it was way too bad today. I did a test record, couldn't hear anything. So I'm just going to do a voiceover for this whole section. This whole video is just basically going to be about a little bit about myself, my thoughts for the channel, and probably what you all guys want to hear is the Bigfoot trip. So first, who am I? I'm Matthew Scott Miller. A lot of people ask me why I use my full name, and it's because as an actor, which is what I'm currently doing, it's a little bit more distinguishable than just Matt Miller or Matthew Miller. The name is too common. It's bad enough I already have to fight with another Matthew Scott Miller. A lot of times people get me confused with him. He was working on I believe the iCarly show for quite a while. Also, what I do, I'm an actor. I also do production design. I'm also a prop master. I do a lot of work in Hollywood. I've done a lot of work here for quite a few years, 4 or 5 years now. I have a lot of background in construction, masonry, a lot of building background. I worked for a housing construction company for a few years in Pennsylvania. And I was also in the military. So right out of high school, I joined the Air Force. I joined the security forces. If you're not sure what that is, it's basically security for the Air Force, for the bases. We also did military police work. I spent the majority of my 6.5 years at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware at the 436 Security Forces Squadron. Amazing place. I have a love-hate relationship with that place, but it was still fun times. Unfortunately, I didn't get to stay in as long as I wanted to. I had a lot of injuries from deployments and work that just kept piling up, and I wasn't able to stay in, so they forced me out. So I guess that's pretty much it about me. You guys really want to know about the trip. First, a disclaimer. The video that was edited by the infographic show, I have nothing to do with. I know everyone was complaining in the comments that there was a section that I recorded with the camera where they wanted you to listen to something that had background music playing. Nothing I can do about it. So for the trip, I was hired by the challenge guy, who I know very well. I've known him for quite a few years. And he basically asked me if I wanted to come along. He needed someone that was really good with survival, security, and medical. So those kind of my main roles for the entire trip. I took care of all the security aspects, which would be being armed because we were going out into the woods. There are black bears, possibly brown bears up there in Oregon. There's moose, there's elk, there's cougars, and potentially Bigfoot. I also took over the survival role to make sure everyone had everything they were going to need for. I think we originally planned for a week, but unfortunately our trip got cut short dramatically. I'm also medically trained, so I brought lots of medical equipment, and it was also the transport because I have a very large F-250 XLT Super Cab truck. So I'm going to do a totally separate video about all the gear I took, because I took a lot. I took way more than everyone else did. I actually took 2 of everything, just because I was in charge of so much. I had to make sure everyone was safe during the trip, that everyone had food. Even though they did bring their own food, I wanted to make sure, worst comes to worst, there was still emergency food. I had to make sure everyone was medically prepared. I had to make sure I brought medical supplies for minor and major medical problems, which luckily we didn't have any. So all my gear was doubled. I took 2 of everything I took. And I brought 14 days of dried food. For the majority of the trip, I ate military MREs. I've eaten so many of them, I just don't care anymore. So I brought a week's worth of those, plus a 14-day emergency food kit, which can feed 4 people for 14 days. But again, I'll go over that in a separate video. Some people were asking me if I did any of the filming. Yes, I did do some filming, not much. I kind of held the camera when I had to. I did take care of all the drone operations because I do own a drone. I have a DJI Mini 2, I believe it is. I bought it at the beginning of the year. It's fairly nice. I've used it quite a bit. Another question everyone was asking me was I armed? Of course. I was security. So I brought 2 weapons with me for the trip. The first one I brought was a handgun. For the gun geeks out there, I brought a Taurus 24/7 G2 45 caliber. It's a fairly nice gun. It's a 4.2 inch barrel, 12 round mags, pretty standard. I actually tried to buy a Smith & Wesson 500 Magnum 6-shot revolver way in advance, 4 months in advance, but I could not find one. I couldn't find one anywhere. I called every gun shop within 150 miles of Los Angeles. Nobody had one for sale. But it was also during the time of the pandemic, and people in California were crisis buying guns. So most gun shops were actually fairly empty of everything. So in my 45, I had 2 mags with me, both 12 rounds, and I had them armed with the Remington 230 grain jacketed hollow points, which I figured most of the encounters we would even have up there while we were walking would probably be black bears and cougars, which a 45 caliber is more than enough to take down either one of those. While we did have a black bear encounter, I did not have to shoot any. But honestly, I was more worried about the cougars on that entire trip than the black bears. While black bears can be deadly, most black bears will run away. At the camp, I did bring a shotgun because I wanted something that was more readily available and easy to use for anyone that was there. So I took my trusty, reliable 12 gauge pump shotgun. It's a 1971 High Standard Arms J.C. Higgins Model 20 for any gun nerds out there that want to know exactly what it is. It's a very old pump shotgun. It was actually my grandfather's. Very reliable though. And I had it loaded with some Winchester Super X 1-ounce hollow point slugs at 2 3/4 size. Way more than enough to take down a bear. I've shot some pretty big game with that gun. It works very well. So what are my thoughts on the trip? The trip was interesting. The trip was long. So I basically drove the entire trip there and back just because most people that we went were not totally familiar with driving such a big truck, so I just drove the whole trip. It did mean I was awake for a very long time, though. I think the first day I was up for 36 hours, which wasn't horrible. I actually started to only get groggy at about 30 hours. The first day we got there, it was basically just finding where we were going, which wasn't terribly difficult. I did a lot of research ahead of time of where we were going. I actually picked out the location. The challenge guy asked me if I could get him close to a specific location that he wanted to go to. So I did my best and I got us as close as we could get. And we hiked the rest of the way we needed to. So we had a fairly good camping spot. Very, very deep into the woods. Nobody was ever going to bother us or find us out there. But the first day was pretty much set up. We got there pretty early in the afternoon. I think it was like 2 or 3. We had a couple hours to set up, get a fire going, put some cameras up. We ended up putting the trail cam up by my truck because we only had access to one. And they all wanted to bring food that was in a cooler. So we figured, well, the best place, if anything is going to come up, it's going to smell the food that we have in the truck bed. We might as well put the trail camera there. We never ended up getting anything on the trail cam for the whole 4.5 days we were there. Like nothing besides us. We were the only people in the picture. Yeah. So after we got camp set up, we got a fire going. It was a little difficult. Most of the stuff up there was very wet at the time of the year we went. The ground was soaked. All the wood was soaked. I ended up using a mixture of hand sanitizer and pine tree sap in some fairly dried wood that I found inside of a decayed log to even get a spark on it, which actually worked fairly well. We started using that method of hand sanitizer and pine tree sap for the rest of the time. We couldn't get the fire going from just the warm coals, which I think was only once. I think we only had to redo it one time. Otherwise, it pretty much stayed going all the whole trip. Yep. So the next day, we went and hiked down to this creek that I found on the map. It wasn't really marked very well, but I knew it was there. And we figured if we were going to try to find at least footprints or anything, the best place we could find them would be the creek bed. So we hiked down there, and we found quite a few bear prints. After looking at the bear prints, like I've seen bear prints before, but I know from some of the research that we were going over on the way up there that a lot of people misidentified Bigfoot tracks as double bear prints from either black bears or brown bears. And after actually seeing one in the mud blatantly right next to the creek bed, I totally understand how people can get those confused as Bigfoot prints. It was quite similar to an actual footprint. Like, if it's stepped correctly, I could see it going that way. So we followed the creek bed for a while, and that's when Challenge Guy had the incident with the bears. That was kind of... I kind of thought it was funny after the fact. But during the moment, I immediately pulled my gun out and started shouting at him, "Hey, there's a bear. There's a bear. You need to get back here. There's a bear." And I ended up seeing the two bears run off. They weren't actually that big. I'm guessing they were probably 2 years old. They weren't huge. They might have been 3, but they weren't very big black bears. I'm thinking they were probably black bears from the low ground silhouette. And also, while we were hiking around, I did notice that there was a lot of bones in the same areas where we had the incident with the bears. What we assume were bears. Lots of bones everywhere. Found a couple deer skulls. Found a whole set of a deer, but scattered all around the creek bed in like about 100-yard radius. Probably dragged around by coyotes. We did hear some coyotes while we were up there. But that's one thing that people have always discussed online is why can't we find bones of a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, whatever you'd like to call them. And as someone who's been in the woods a lot and I've seen a lot of dead animals, I can tell you that finding skeletal remains of carnivores and predators is very difficult. It's challenging. Most predatory animals, especially like mountain lions, they know when they're getting sick and they're about to die. They usually go into hiding, and you'll never see them again. I don't know the same about bears. I've never seen a bear skull. I've never seen a cougar skull. The only predatory animal I've ever found a skull for was a coyote, and that was out here in the Mojave Desert. And you also have to remember, bones do decay. It may take a bit, but they do decay. They don't last forever. Insects will eat them. They're just straight calcium by the time they're all the flesh and muscles off of it. And also, there are carnivores out there that'll chew bones up. Wolves, coyotes, dogs, they all do it. They want the bone marrow from inside, so they destroy the bones. The bones are just fragments by the end of it. So I think that gives a good reason to why it's fairly difficult to find remains of a Sasquatch. I think it was night 2 or night 3. We went out into the field. I don't remember which day it was. We set the girls out in the middle of this giant field, and me and Challenge Guy hid fairly far away because we had a night vision camera. That was like the weirdest night, I think, when we were there. Is I was kind of listening to the environment around us while he was looking through the night vision. I'm very keen to listening when I'm out in the woods, and I was listening to the frogs. There were a lot of tree frogs and crickets around, and I would listen to the croaks and the chirps they would make, and they would occasionally go quiet, but I don't know if they were going quiet because something was coming around, or if it had to do with the weird noise that was going on with our cameras. So we heard this weird humming noise when we got back to our cameras. No clue what it was. Also, I could feel the ground vibrate while we were up there, and I did check back later when we returned from our trip, and I checked the earthquake map, and there was a minor earthquake at the same time we were up there doing that experiment in that same area we were at. So it's like, well, that might be kind of throwing things off. A lot of animals can react ahead of time to earthquakes more than we do. They can actually pick it up much better than we can. We did some more hiking for the third day. We found some things that kind of looked like possible footprints. I mean, they were larger than what my foot is. I were 14 wide. And after seeing a double bear print, I kind of knew what I was already looking for. And they didn't look like double bear prints. They definitely had a more distinguished look to them. But I couldn't make out exactly what it was because they had water in them and they were kind of depressed and they looked maybe a day or two old. So I couldn't guarantee what they were. And then the fourth day when we woke up, that's the day we called it. We actually talked about calling it pretty late, early in that same morning. It was cold. Like, we were expecting temperatures, between 40 to 60, maybe dropping to 30. But I registered that night in my tent at 15 degrees. Everything we had froze. Equipment was frozen. Tents were frozen. I actually couldn't get out of my tent. I had to cut a hole through it to get out. Totally destroyed my tent just so I could leave it. And then everything we had was frozen. Like everything. Everything had ice on it. It was a disaster. None of us were planning for, freezing temperatures while we were up there. We knew we were pretty high up in elevation, but we weren't expecting that. So we called it on day 4. Also, I've been to pretty high altitudes, but something about that specific mountain actually gave me altitude sickness for the first night we were there. It kind of freaked me out. And then I remember a few days later, I was like, oh yeah, that's altitude sickness because I haven't had it in so long. So that was kind of a shocker on the first night. So I guess with all that said, the one big question everyone is asking me too is like, do I believe in Bigfoot? And do I want to go back? Well, the answer is yes, I want to go back. Absolutely. That was so fun to do. To go search for something that may or may not exist is exhilarating. It's almost like the thrill of the hunt, but we're not actually hunting it. There's no way in my entire life would I ever shoot a Sasquatch unless it was trying to kill me. I mean, I don't ever plan on doing it. Even if I saw one, I'd rather just get footage of it and hand it over to other people like, here, we found it. But do I believe in it? I don't know. I can't specifically say yes or no. I'm open to I'm open to see it if it's there. My curiosity is there enough that I would like to continue this journey. I mean, I've seen some weird stuff. I've seen Dogman. If you don't know what Dogman is, you should look it up. I mean, I grew up in Michigan. That is like the lore legend of Michigan, Wisconsin is Dogman. Granted, we have Bigfoot lore there, but most people see Dogman. But that's for that's for a totally different video. But yeah, over my 30 plus years, I've seen a lot of weird things in the woods. I wouldn't be surprised if there was, a bipedal primate that we just didn't know about. I mean, we find new insects and creatures all the time, all over the world that we just didn't know existed. There is so much land available that's just open country. Only half of the United States is actually, publicly lived in. And some of those areas are still widespread. There's tons of open country in this land. There's tons of open country in the world. Yeah, there's no way that humans have touched every piece of land, of every square inch of this entire planet. It's just not possible. But on that, I pretty much probably already run over my allotted time for the B-roll footage that I took while I was out walking, because I wanted to actually film all this on camera, but I couldn't because of the wind. So at this point, I'm probably looping stuff, or I had a bunch of photos up for you guys to look at from the trip. So I'm going to cut it short there, and the next video, I'm going to go over some of the gear that I took, which I think is important, and also, where's my channel going from here? Probably continuing more survival stuff. I really enjoy doing survival expeditions. I really enjoy going out with people that just they want to go out but they don't understand what to do in those situations. I have a lot of experience doing that. I'm a very good navigator. I don't really need a map to navigate anywhere. I know a lot of very old, ancient navigation techniques that they just don't teach anymore, that I learned from my Native American great grandmother and my grandfather. I grew up hunting, fishing, living in the woods, and I'm very good at it. So that's primarily what the channel is going to be about. Is I'm going to teach you guys I'll teach you guys the basic skills that other people teach, but I'll also teach you stuff that nobody else teaches. Another thing that I want to do is I want to do a monthly book review on survival books, because there are some very good books out there that teach very good survival techniques, and there are books out there that just absolutely suck and you should not read. And I have quite a big collection, so I'd like to go over some of those. But yeah, I'm going to wrap it up there for today. Thank you everyone from coming from the Infographic channel to my channel, and I hope you guys stick around. I will give you guys the best content that I can possibly make. See you guys in the next one.